all aboard for your chance to win $1,000 every week until December 28th. That's right, $1,000 cash just in time for the holidays. To hop on board, just head to churchillmortgage.com and punch your ticket to the Churchill Express giveaway. Visit churchillmortgage.com for your chance to win big.
This is a paid advertisement. NMLS ID 1591. NMLSconsumeraccess.org. Equal housing lender. 1749 Mallory Lane, Suite 100, Brentwood, Tennessee 37027.
Unwrap incredible Sony deals at Rockbrook Camera. The Sony a6100 mirrorless camera is fun and easy to use for beginning photographers looking to capture special moments to share. Get it this week for $698. Save $150. Capture all the action with popular Sony lenses. Save up to $200. The best Sony holiday camera deals and the local camera experts are at Rockbrook Camera. 1 block south of 168th and West Center in Omaha, 70th and Pioneers in Lincoln, and online at rockbrookcamera.com.
Hey, y'all, it's Woody Overton, the host of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast, and you're listening to Local Leaders, the podcast.
Welcome back to Local Leaders, the podcast. And today I have a great guest. It is an author from right here in Livingston Parish. His name is Stephen Hebert, and he wrote a book called COVID-19, One Family's Journey. So welcome to the podcast, Stephen.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm glad to have you here. So for all the listeners out there, I want to just kind of start off and tell you a little bit of how me and Stephen met. We have a mutual friend who Stephen had made aware that he had this story that he had written. This is a true story, by the way. He didn't make this up. Important to say, this is a autobiography of his journey with COVID-19. But not only that, it's the many facts that Stephen Hebert has to go along with this relative to what he does for a living, the experience with his wife and children, and some other things that we're going to touch on. We don't want to get too in depth with it because it's a story and we want you to read it. But we definitely want to get your taste buds watering, I guess, or your brain buds or whatever it is that you use to read with, your iBuds, and really fire you up for this amazing story. So we're just going to jump into it. And before we talk about anything to do with COVID, let's talk a little bit about you prior to COVID. You have an interesting story. You're 48?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you're still a young guy. We're actually very, very close to the same age. And you married your high school sweetheart.
Yes, sir, we did.
All right. So she knows you pretty good.
Better than I know myself. Yes,
How
sir.
many children do you have?
Have 3 amazing kids. Samantha, she's going to be 23 in October here coming up.
Yeah.
And then I have a son. He's 20. He turned 20. His name's Trent, and in April.
All right.
We have our youngest, our caboose, Rhett. He just turned 19 on September 24th.
All right. So you've got 3 wonderful kids there, and the good thing is you have some older ones that are in up there in age enough to where they can really grasp what you were going through later on in life, and they were mature enough to understand it, and of course be as helpful as they possibly could be in a situation like that. Now, when you were younger than you are now, you wanted to be a vascular surgeon?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I was born. When I was born, I never really. I always wanted to be in the medical field.
You knew that.
I knew that.
Wow.
From early on. I can't even remember when it first came to mind. I actually operated on a teddy bear that I was given on my birthday when in the hospital. My grandparents had given me a teddy bear, and the music box in it quit working, and I wanted to find out what was wrong. I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and cut it open and got to the box, fixed it, put it back in, and sewed it up with Mom's needle and thread.
There you go.
So
that's really early in life to be doing surgery there. But it's amazing that you had a feeling that that's the field you wanted to go into so early in your life.
it was hardwired in me.
Very interesting. And then, as we all do, you kind of went through now Stephen wasn't as always as put together as the man you see right here. Like all of us, he had that time in life where he was figuring himself out, maybe would be a good term for it. And this is an important part of this story, in that you ended up getting your GED after well, I guess you could say after you decided in high school. Eventually you got your GED, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, one thing that's important to mention is sometimes teenagers think because they have a GED, that's it, right? You're going to work at McDonald's the rest of your life, and hey, if you want to work at McDonald's, there's no shame in that. But some people think that, well, I can't do anything else. And if you have any youngsters around that are in that situation, here's a man that he didn't think just because he had his GED that he was stuck to a life of that, right? You push through. And we just said, since he was a youngster, he knew he wanted to be in the medical field. And so that required a little more education. So take me to that time.
So my parents got divorced when I was 16. We had a rocky household during my teenage years. But once I got on my own, and I did get my GED, dropped out when I was a junior in high school, and I really wasn't doing good. I could have dropped out sooner.
Yeah.
I might have grown up sooner, but
right.
I did. I started flipping houses, working for a construction company, making $7 an hour. That's where I started. And about 2.5 years into that, we were having lunch at a all-you-can-eat chicken place, and I just knew it was time for a change.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to be in the medical field, knew I wanted to wear scrubs.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how to go about it, but I started exploring and seeking and investigating.
Yeah. Yeah. And that led you at some point to get your CNA?
That's what, yes, sir. That was my first stepping stone in the medical field.
Yeah. In that certified nursing assistant, right. Maybe for those that out there that aren't familiar with the acronym, I guess. And eventually, and if you're wondering why we're fast forwarding a little bit, it's because, we want you to read the book. We can't tell you everything, but
it's a lot of detail.
It's a lot of detail, but eventually, this led you to Our Lady of the Lake at some point. And, let me tell you, this is around the mid 1990s, and Our Lady of the Lake, as it is now, was a very respectable college, especially for specific fields like nursing, the radiologic technology, those sorts of things. And back then, X-ray techs I can speak for because my wife is one. X-ray tech was a field to go into. There wasn't a ton of them, and they paid great. And so, the interesting thing to that is you graduated in 1997. My wife graduated in 1997 from Our Lady of the Lake College also. From there, eventually you received a certification as an RN first assistant?
Yes, that was shortly after that. So just want to plug this in there. But
yes.
In 94, so I was a CNA working in the operating room, and then
yes.
I saw what a surgical tech did.
Yeah.
And they were in the middle of the surgery, and they got to work with the surgeons, and I was very interested in doing that, so I became a surgical tech, or scrub tech, they call them,
yes.
in the field. And so I enrolled at the Lady of the Lake College and went into the program in 94 and graduated in 94. And I actually worked as a surgical tech through nursing school.
Wow.
And then I immediately went to nursing school, because I knew that we were going to need more money, for our family. Me and my wife were planning on getting married, which we did in 95.
Yes.
And I knew on a budget, she wanted to be a home mom, and so I was going to need a little more money coming in. So I went to nursing school. But to point out, your wife, X-ray tech, they were still in school.
Yeah.
That was the longest program. That same class that she was in,
yes.
I graduated twice before they graduated once. And that's the honest to God truth. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And, one thing I want to ask you is, okay, so your wife, you're in a unique position because you and your wife were high school sweethearts. So was she with you during the time that you got your GED, or she was?
Yes.
So, how supportive was she of you doing this? I can't commend you enough for not giving up on your education, right?
She was the driving force.
Sounds like you grew up a little bit there between the time that you dropped out of high school and the time that, let's say, you went into Our Lady of the Lake. There was a major maturity situation there.
I knew we were planning a life together, and I knew I was going to have to work hard for it.
Yeah.
And she was that driving force.
So a woman saved you.
She did.
Yeah, I can relate. Very good. It's a beautiful thing. So you're rocking, Stephen, at this point. And I also want to ask you, it's a lot of education. It's a lot to learn, right? To go do these things. Was it a struggle for you? Or were you someone that was always, good with the books, let's say? It was the application that you struggled with?
I had created for myself some pretty bad habits in junior high, and that led into high school, which just got worse.
Yeah.
So I did. It was difficult, and I guess what's unique to my story is that I took it a step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't jump steps. Like, I didn't go from just being a high school graduate to getting my BSN, a 4-year degree in nursing.
Yeah.
I took baby steps. It was a more expensive route because each program costs money.
Yeah.
But with the ability to pay student loans and the ability got better as my income got better to pay them back.
Yes.
I took it a step at a time. It took longer. But I feel that I learned a lot more, and I became more valuable in the market.
Yes, very good way of putting that. And I hope that some of these young folks that maybe listen to this, they listen to that specific part of the story, because this is someone who admittedly, had a time in his life where he was struggling and made his way through, and you had the support of your wife there all the way to support you. And as I said, that's a beautiful thing. Now you became an RN. You received a certification of an RN first assistant after nursing school. Is that typical or atypical?
Yes, it's typical.
Okay.
You actually have to be a practicing nurse in the operating room with certifications in order to go to the program.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do that, and then at some point you landed in hospice and doing some hospice work. And tell me about that.
So 15 years in the operating room.
Yeah.
I pretty much maxed out on any level of being able to go higher or what have you. I enjoyed every bit of it. I did develop some back problems, so standing in one place, operating with the surgeons is something I love to do.
Sure.
It was taxing.
Takes a toll, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes 12 to 16 hours in a day. Standing in one place became a little tough, and you're in awkward positions. The surgeon can always be comfortable, but it's hard for the assistant. They just have to adapt.
That's a great point, yeah.
So after 15 years in the operating room, I actually was doing some research as well with the vascular surgeons that I was working with, and the research actually opened a door for me to get into cancer research. And so I did 10 years of cancer research, And by doing cancer research, I was working with patients that, of course, became terminally ill.
Yes.
And that's what opened the hospice door, that and losing my mom.
Yeah, yeah.
So we lost her in 2012. And that really got me going full time in hospice.
Yeah. And that's a I would imagine a very tough field for a lot of people, because you're seeing someone typically with hospice at the end of their life for whatever reason, and you have to have a comfort, I would imagine, about you in order to do that, and you definitely have that. And what a blessing it is to have that with you, and you can kind of see these people to the end or the end of their life on earth, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, what's amazing is I learned more from them than I ever would have taught them myself.
Yeah.
You know, and working with the families and grieving with them, preparing them for the death. The longer time we had on hospice together, the easier it was when their loved one was gone.
Yeah.
And it's when hospice is called in at the last minute, we don't have as much time to prepare the family and to just to prepare the situation.
Yeah.
To help things, just smooth things out, in that transition.
Absolutely. And you told me an interesting story when we met the first time about someone that had passed that you had dealt with in hospice, and he wanted to die at home, as he put it, and kind of tell me that story.
Yeah, he had his family had donated property to him. That was it's been, even here in Livingston Parish, we have roads named after grandkids and so forth.
Yeah.
So this was in Ascension Parish, and he had built his home there, and his kids and family, part of his family, they built next door and next door and next door on the property. So their whole road, I believe, was their last name, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He did not. He wanted to die at home. That was his home. That was, just his comfort zone and where he wanted to be. And things got really, really complicated at the end. We didn't know how long that was going to go on, and it was extremely stressful on the family. He was requiring nursing care pretty much constantly.
Yeah.
And so we would have had to stay with him 24/7, and it was just too complicated for the situation. And so we were going to transfer him to an inpatient hospice unit so that he could have that adequate care that he needed around the clock, and it would also relieve the family from the stress that they were undergoing at that time, because they're not medical professionals, and he really needed IV medications and 24/7 nursing care. And so I hated to do it, because he and I had gotten pretty close, and I always tell the patients, we'll do everything we can to honor your wishes, but if it comes to that point where we really can't control your symptoms at the house, we may have to move you to an inpatient unit.
Yeah.
And so in his situation, we did have to put him in an ambulance, and he got the last word in. He passed away in the driveway.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So
he was determined.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I was actually happy for him. We knew he was dying.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I figured he had maybe 24 hours at the most,
Yeah.
But we just brought him right back in the house and
Wow.
put him back in his bed, and we took care of, did what we normally do for a death visit.
Sure. Wow.
And so, it
He did.
worked out.
He got what he wanted.
Yes, sir.
And that's a beautiful thing. So I just thought that was a great story, and something that these folks would appreciate hearing. Now, eventually you became a charge nurse, which is a major deal, for you. And that led you to running at some point the largest COVID-19 unit, one of the largest in the state.
Yeah, I actually got a healthcare administration degree a little bit later in my career, and that just set me up for being in positions as an administrator or management positions.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that I was working as a charge nurse for, I was actually doing agency nursing, which is like travel nursing, but I was doing it locally because I didn't have to leave the state.
Well, that's a nice thing. Yeah.
I could have left the state, but why do that when you could be home every night?
Yeah.
So I just pretty much worked within the state lines, and the shifts kept popping open over here in Denham Springs. We had a unit that they had turned into a COVID unit, and they needed as much help as they could get, and I ended up spending a lot of time over there.
Yeah, and now we're listeners, we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of the story, and there's a whole story to Stephen, but prior to COVID rearing its ugly head, but. So I want to impress that there's several things I skipped over intentionally because they're really good and you want to read those. But his story is amazing from start to finish. I have read his entire manuscript. It's an easy read from the fact that he captures your interest the whole time. From start to finish, and I couldn't put it down. I mean, literally read probably half of it in a day and a half. And then I showed it to my wife, and then I had to beg her to give it back to me. I said, look, I got a podcast I got to do. Give you that thing back so I can research and read this thing. But a great book. Thanks, Jim. And it's very important that now we get to the point that, you're running a COVID-19 unit. And I want to back up a little bit from that. So you were obviously in the medical industry before COVID was COVID, I guess you could say, before anybody knew what to call it. Do you recall like your first kind of experiences with, this is a little different than what we've seen?
Yes, so it's interesting you asked that. I don't think we've spoken about it before, but in January of 2020, I was actually a nurse manager of an inpatient hospice unit in Baton Rouge, and I was the ADON for the hospice company, and I ran the inpatient unit, which I really do like doing inpatient nursing as well, inpatient hospice nursing. Yeah. And in January, just after the new year had turned, all of a sudden we started seeing our hospice patients coming in or new admits coming in with a lot of respiratory issues. And it's not uncommon that happens because that is one of the respiratory distress is one of the main signs that we would normally admit somebody. That's what the fella that passed away in his driveway was having in his home. Yes. Was severe respiratory distress. He didn't have COVID. This was years ago, that story. But that is one of the symptoms that can get very difficult to treat in the house, and you have to move somebody to an inpatient unit, which we were in the process of doing when he passed. Yeah. So this January, I noticed an influx of people that were coming in with respiratory distress. And that's not uncommon during the flu season. January, of course, is in the cold months. What we call cold here in Louisiana. Yeah. And things were pretty tough, but there was a lot of people that were dealing with increased secretions in the chest, difficulty breathing, and at the end they would die from that. And of course their hospice diagnosis as well, their terminal diagnosis. Yeah. And there was one guy in particular I saw in the medical records when I was screening him, as I was personally admitting him to our unit, that they had done a viral panel on him, which is very uncommon. At least it was in my practice, And so I noticed that one of the viruses was positive, and it said coronavirus. And I've been in medicine for 30 years, and I'd never heard that term before. Yeah. And I may have heard it, but it never really.
Woodhouse Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram is bringing you more this holiday season, finishing the year with big savings on the entire model lineup during the Wrap Up the Year sales event. Save up to $13,000 off MSRP on a 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab Laramie 4x4 for qualified buyers. Explore all our year-end lease and finance deals at WoodhouseCDJRBellevue.com or WoodhouseChryslerJeepDodge.com. This is Woodhouse. With approved credit, tax title license extra. When financed with Chrysler Capital, $299 doc fee to its signing. Stock number BC240134. Offer expires 12/31/2023. See dealer for details.
Unwrap incredible Nikon deals at Rockbrook Camera. Save $400 on the versatile Nikon Z6 II full-frame camera. The Nikon Z6 II features 4K Ultra HD video and 24-megapixel sensor, perfect for high-quality images. Getting closer to your subject with Nikon Z lenses. On sale this week for up to $300 off. The best Nikon holiday camera deals and the local camera experts are at Rockbrook Camera. 1 block south of 168th and West Center in Omaha, 70th and Pioneers in Lincoln, and online at rockbrookcamera.com.
It wasn't pronounced or anything
Sure.
that made me, but this actually sent me to Google.
Yeah.
And I Googled coronavirus because I didn't know what I was dealing with.
Sure.
And the same individual had bladder cancer, and he was a hospice patient.
Yeah.
You know, but when I admitted him, I saw that and I looked it up, and I didn't know much about it, and it just said it was a common respiratory illness, and actually a lot of other illnesses come from that, you know, respiratory SARS and ARDS, and it can lead to that.
Yes.
And so I learned a little bit about it, but I didn't really blink an eye to it. Took care of the guy. We actually became pretty decent friends, and he died a few days later.
Oh, wow.
And I was giving him respiratory treatments that we normally would give, giving him medications, IV medications that we would normally give. The thing about it is the respiratory treatments are called nebulizers, so it creates a mist and a smoke in the air.
Yes.
And we don't do that with COVID patients because we don't want to expose the healthcare worker
Yes.
to the nebulizers or the family or whomever might be visiting. And so that was one of the immediate rules that they put in place for COVID patients. Even though it is a good treatment for respiratory distress, it was contraindicated in COVID-19 because of the aerosol spray.
Yeah.
You know, that's created, and it could have the pathogen in the air.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know at the time. I didn't, you know, and I sat there with him, and
Yeah. I mean,
he did the treatment, and we talked and got to know each other, and
COVID going everywhere.
yeah.
More or less.
So it wasn't much longer. About a week later, it was on a weekend, and I was just watching the news before I went to bed, and they said the first coronavirus patient identified in one of the I states, like Indiana, Idaho, Illinois, something like that, and had the first person that has died that they had said, and I was like, coronavirus, where's this coming from? And then that's when it all started. I actually went to New Orleans. They had a big hospice conference in New Orleans in March.
Yeah.
And we were in that conference, and the third day, I think it was 3 of 3 days. It was the last day. Might have been 4 days, but they came, the hotel administration came to talk to our group, which was about 200 people. And they said, I'm sorry, y'all, we have to report to y'all that there was someone in the hotel that tested positive for coronavirus. They left Monday. And so our conference had crossed over with this fella stay there at the hospital. They just had to report it to us. And again, we didn't know a whole lot about it. But at that point, there were 1 or 2 patients that had died in the vet hospital from COVID-19 at this point. And that had just happened that weekend.
Yeah.
And so next thing you know, by the time we left New Orleans, there were about 17 or 19 people positive that were known positive in the hospital.
Yeah.
And it pretty much took off from there.
It went crazy. And, you know, it's interesting. Just a little side note that I'll say, and a little story I have on that, since you brought up, you know, the early stages of it. I was actually at a pro show. I'll never forget this, in March of 2020. And for the paint business, which I was in for 20 plus years, we would do little pro shows where we would have a bunch of vendors and we would cook and all those sorts of things. And I'll never forget this. A painter came up to my booth and, I'm doing my thing and, hey, you want a T-shirt and all that. And I went to shake his hand and he gave me his elbow. And I'm like, that's weird. And so I did that. And he says, they got a virus going around. And I said, oh, you're talking about that virus that's overseas? He said, no, it's here now. I ain't shaking nobody's hand. Here, I'll give you the elbow. And that's what we did. And I thought he was crazy. And I'm like, it was in and out of my head. And a week later, the whole world shut down.
Sure.
Literally, and including the United States. And I will never forget that, though, because I remember when he left my booth, I thought, he's crazy. He's lost his mind. Smelled too much paint fumes, giving me his elbow. And I remember those early days too. And nobody knew. And it was two weeks to flatten the curve, right? And everybody's willing to do that. And we're like, yeah, we can't breathe on each other. We got to stay huddled in the house, and it's all going to go away. And I think everybody kind of was learning at the same time, for the most part. But you're right there in it. You're directly in the medical field. And so you kind of see this happening. You leave this hotel and it's spreading like wildfire even around you. So you get back, and what happens in that medical field?
So, I can imagine the feeling is a lot like when the war, like World War II had broke out and so many people, they couldn't sit still. They wanted to serve. Yeah. And I would imagine the feeling was similar to that, but it was like, as a healthcare worker, for those who are passionate about what they do, we want to get out there and make a difference.
Yes. And important to say, I'll just stop you right there, because that, it's a different breed. It's kind of like firefighters, and they run to the fire when everybody else is running away. Same thing with healthcare workers. I also have a loved one in that field, and when this happened, obviously X-rays stopped, and they said, hey, we need you to stand in front of the hospital and make sure the only people going in there are supposed to be in there. And it was a horrible time to tell someone, you can't come in and see that sonogram. You can't come in and we know your husband is sick. You have to stay in the car. And she was one of the people that had to do that. But that was her way of helping, and she wanted to help in any way she could. And so you medical people, first responders, all of that, you stepped up. And you did what you always do, and that's take care of all of us that don't do it. And that deserves a big shout out, because you had to be scared in a way. I mean, you don't want to catch it either, right?
I can't say that I was really scared.
Yeah.
Again, the desire to help it was overwhelming compared to the fear of getting it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you're passionate about your work, you're especially taking care of other people.
That's an interesting insight. And because us on the outside would think you would have been. At some point, you start to kind of not feel good, right? Like,
yeah, I actually had gotten sick after I took care of the fella I told you about a little earlier, but we didn't know again what any of this was in January. So I had spent a couple of days in bed. Actually had to cancel an annual bow fishing trip that I make in January. It was awful. I know. So we'd always go down to the coast in Leeville and with Marshmasters in January every year. I've been doing it for almost 20 years. Except when the weather would go bad or what have you. But I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't have respiratory symptoms, but I had 2 or 3 days where I really was knocked. The wind was knocked out of me. Yeah. And but I did. I got up that Monday, went back to work, and I served with our local church here in the Watson area, and went back to church. Got back on my feet, and then we had the conference in New Orleans, and that's when the information started coming out a little stronger and giving you some things to do to protect yourself,
Sure.
basically.
Wash your hands for 30
social
seconds.
distance.
Coughing an elbow, make sure it's your own elbow, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Check your temperature.
Yes.
If you're, over 100, stay home. 99, you might even want to watch it more often, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but I ended up going and doing the travel nursing, which was local, though, because I didn't have to leave the state. And I started that in April. And I just worked constantly.
Yeah.
I kind of have a personal balance. I've learned the hard way back in the days, but I would work 6 days and take the 7th one off.
Yeah.
And that's what I did from April until I got sick in September.
Wow. Amazing. And you saw a lot, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
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 So take me to that point in September. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit.
So, being that I was working the COVID unit, and I would go to a couple different ones. So it was never a time that I wasn't around those patients. I would float between them, but locally in Denham, the unit there at Sage, it was very close to the house. Again, very easy for me to get there, get home. I'd strip at the door and do the usual thing, leave our shoes outside and all that stuff. But so what had happened is anytime I would have a sniffle, I would start monitoring my temperature a little bit better. If I started to feel, because I do get seasonal allergies and sometimes have to get on antibiotics and steroids usually 3 times a year. I know that may be odd for some people, but it's been a problem I've had since I was a child.
Sure.
And so I have my medicine of choice, medicine that works for me, and it's very easy fix, and it doesn't set me back too much in regards to working and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But something was different this time. But I would drive through and get swabbed about every other week or so, especially if I had some tickling in my throat or something that gave me an idea this isn't normal.
Yeah.
But September 2nd, I believe, is the day that it happened, when I noticed that so this was the only day, Jim, that I broke my rule. They were that week. So I didn't take the 7th day off. And I worked 10 days, 10 shifts in a row. So it was
wow.
And I know there's a lot of people out there doing that. This is just my personal balance that I need. And it's actually biblically, commanded there too for us to take that 7th day off.
Sure.
So, but anyway, I started getting sick and a little sicker. I went and got tested, drove through, got swabbed. My test took 24 hours to get the results. So that Friday, which I believe was the 5th, I got swabbed on the 3rd or the 4th, and then on the 5th is when whatever that Friday was, that's when I found out that I was COVID negative, but I was positive for rhinovirus, which is a common cold, basically. And so I was a little bit relieved, even though I didn't feel good.
Right.
So I took Saturday off, spent time in bed and nursing myself, doing the vitamin C, taking medications. Sunday, I worked a half a shift to split with somebody to help them. But it was Monday morning that I woke up and couldn't taste and couldn't smell. And right then I knew this is on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a key signal because I would imagine there's a conglomerate of things that you could have had going on that you would not have lost your sense of taste and smell at the same time. And I've had COVID as well. And that, I experienced a lot of coughing and just felt horrible. And but when I knew was when that sense of taste and smell went away. And I said, oh, yeah, I was definitely
I woke
COVID.
up. Yeah, they were both completely gone, and that had never happened in my life. I mean, it's just
so weird. It is the strangest thing for the people that haven't experienced it. It's when you experience it, it's like you're going around smelling everything, right?
Oh,
Well, I can't smell this, but what about this? And you're cutting garlic, whatever you can do and nothing. There's just no, and food tastes like just paper. There's nothing to it.
Yeah.
Very weird. So you noticed that, and then what?
So that was on Monday. And I still, again, wasn't feeling well, and I was on some antibiotics. And but at that time, we were holding back on the steroids that I normally would take, a Medrol dose pack, and we held that because that's not good to take if you had COVID, and my nurse practitioner wanted to monitor that. So we held back on that. But by Wednesday, I had gotten pretty short of breath. Just getting up and going to the bathroom, I'd get winded, in my bedroom, from our bed to the toilet and back is not, but maybe 15 steps round trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you get winded,
and you're someone that's used to making rounds, you're used to walking, you're used to being up on your feet, and you're getting winded going back and forth to the restroom,
right?
So
I knew. Okay, and I started monitoring my oxygen, of course, and it was dropping slowly. Normal is 95 and up for somebody who's healthy and getting around well.
Sure.
And it was dropping. It was hovering in the 90s on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I noticed that it was dropping into the 80s whenever I was going to the restroom or any exertion. It would get into the 80s, and with the 80s comes huffing and puffing, shortness of breath, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're a nurse, so the amazing perspective here is he kind of knows what he's looking for. You're where some people, they don't even know to check their oxygen maybe, or they don't even, you almost had more information than maybe you wanted to have because you knew, oh boy, this is not right. I shouldn't be in the 80s with my oxygen and things like that. So at that point, what did you do?
I got a hold of my nurse practitioner, kind of explained my symptoms. We hashed it out and talked about it. I really felt like I needed oxygen in the home. I wanted to not go to the ER if I could avoid it, because I knew that I may just, all they're going to do is maybe give me some oxygen and some dexamethasone, which is a type of steroid that was actually working with COVID patients at the time. That's why we had held the other one with my sinus problems I was having. And so she ended up starting me on the dexamethasone, and we got the oxygen at the house.
Yeah.
And that tended to help my symptoms settle for a few days, about 48 to 72 hours.
Yeah.
And so let's say, little did I know the virus was replicating, super fast. And I was developing some severe pneumonia at the time. And it's a good thing. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't have the experience on the COVID units and my past experience before that, but mainly working with the COVID patients directly, up to 30 at a time, we had on the unit there, and just experiencing what each one was going through, how we responded to their symptoms, and who was getting better, who wasn't. Let's try something different. We would do what we could to help get that patient well and get them out of there.
Yeah.
Get them home or get them back to rehab or somewhere where they could get stronger and overcome this. And I knew things were not looking good by Friday, and I was being hard-headed in a sense. I am
you are a male,
a typical Southern
we can be
male.
that way.
Yeah. But I also am, the breadwinner for my family.
Yes.
With the insurance deductibles these days, my out-of-pocket, I knew if I went to the ER, it was gonna cost a lot of money, somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. And at that time, I didn't really know if the government was going to cover the bill or, my insurance. All I know is I figured I was going to be responsible for my deductible. So,
yes. You're a nurse. And so, you can take care of yourself. You're a nurse.
I was sure trying.
Yeah.
And,
that's right.
But then by Friday, I noticed how I was tanking. And I told my wife, I told her 3 things. And I said, if I'm not making sense, or if I'm breathing really fast, or you notice that I turn colors, blue or pale or what have you, and I'm breathing fast, check my oxygen. If if it's lower than 90 and I'm just laying in bed, and especially if it's 85 and below, I want you to disconnect the concentrator, which is the little roll around machine. It goes up to 5 liters, and so the 5 liters, that's the max.
Yeah.
But I said, disconnect me from there, hook me to a tank, and turn it wide open.
Yeah.
Which can get you in some cases, 10 to 15 liters.
Yeah.
Of oxygen, and call 911.
Yeah.
And that's what she did.
Yeah.
On September 12th, the morning of September 12th, it was bad.
Yeah.
And I actually thought I was dying, and I actually knew I was dying, and I was laying in my bed there. And like you had brought up the hospice account earlier, this was not a hospice situation.
Yeah.
They were not prepared. My wife and my children were not prepared for all of this to happen, for me to pass away right there in my bed.
So you're at this point in I guess you could say your COVID journey, and you're still thinking of your wife and kids, right?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
And I was, my prayer was, Lord, let me make it to the ambulance.
Yeah. You're not worried about you.
No.
That's amazing.
I was dying.
Yeah.
And I
didn't want
wanted
them to see that.
Let me get out of the house. And normally I would want to pass away.
Chills.
Yeah, in the house I would want to pass away if I was a hospice patient, terminally ill, and we were expecting it and we're preparing for it. I would want to be at home.
But you knew your family couldn't handle that.
No.
They didn't want them to have to handle that.
They didn't wake up that Saturday morning expecting any of this to happen.
Wow. Yeah. Man, that's real stuff right there. Because not many people are in a situation where they kind of know this could be it, and that's the thought that ran through your mind. What an unselfish thought for you to have. Now you go to the hospital, and we'll skip forward a little bit. And I do want to mention one thing with Stephen's book that you're really going to enjoy is that a lot of this journey was chronicled not only through his eyes, but also through the eyes of family, friends, loved ones. It's an amazing part of this book because he literally has the Facebook post, and it's neat how you did it with it's almost like screenshots that you can sit there and follow along as he's going through this journey. How long were you in the hospital total the first time? And we'll tell you why we're saying the first time. But
the total was 29 days.
29 days between the first and second times.
Correct.
Now, we're going to skip forward a little, and I want to go to the first time, I guess you could say, because Stephen was in the hospital twice. But there was a time the first time around where you had a really important date. Actually, it was 2 dates that were very important to you in your mind. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get out of here, get healthy, get home, so that I can see my son for his birthday.
Woodhouse Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram is bringing you more this holiday season, finishing the year with big savings on the entire model lineup during the Wrap Up the Year sales event. Save up to $13,000 off MSRP on a 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab Laramie 4x4 for qualified buyers. Explore all our year-end lease and finance deals at WoodhouseCDJRBellevue.com or WoodhouseChryslerJeepDodge.com. This is Woodhouse. With approved credit, tax title license extra. When financed with Chrysler Capital. $299 doc fee to its signing. Stock number BC240134. Offer expires 12/31/2023. See dealer for details. All aboard for your chance to win $1,000 every week until December 28th. That's right, $1,000 cash just in time for the holidays. To hop on board, just head to ChurchillMortgage.com and punch your ticket to the Churchill Express giveaway. Visit ChurchillMortgage.com for your chance to win big.
This is a paid advertisement. NMLS ID 1591. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Equal housing lender. 1749 Mallory Lane, Suite 100, Brentwood, Tennessee 37027.
And my wife for her anniversary, or y'all's anniversary, correct?
Yes, sir. So we had the ambulance ride, that 911 call occurred on September 12th, the morning of September 12th. I spent roughly 2 weeks in ICU, and the doctors, I told them, especially my critical care doctor, the main one that was taking care of me, I said, Doc, my 25-year anniversary is coming up on September 23rd. Help me get home for that day.
Yes.
And the very next day, our youngest son, Rhett, his birthday was the 24th. She actually went into labor with Rhett on our anniversary, but had him after midnight, which he has the next day. That was his 18th birthday, which, again, was a incredible milestone in his life.
Absolutely.
25 years of marriage and 18 years of your son, reaching adulthood. I really wanted to be home for that. Hard to come up with better milestones in life than those two, right? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And so I did the best that I could on my end, and the doctor really, he knew how passionate I was about trying to get home, and we talked through it, we worked through it. They adjusted my medications, did what we could, and I promised him. I said, look, if anything happens, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
You can guarantee it.
Yeah. Were you ever on a vent the first time around?
No, I was on what they call a vapor therm, and it shoots high pressure oxygen that's humidified, and it's warm, and they can really boost your oxygen levels with it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
It helped me breathe. It took a lot of the stress off of me. And then they would flip back and forth between the vapotherm and what's called a BiPAP. And a BiPAP is a mask that's forcefully pushing air into you, but it's at a very high pressure. And so I didn't like the BiPAP that much because your cheeks were pushed out like a chipmunk because the air was constantly pushing.
Yes.
And when you breathe in, it would it almost created a hiccup or a gulp type feeling, and I was very uncomfortable wearing it.
Sure.
And so I spent more time convincing the nurses to please let me stay on the vapotherm.
Yeah.
Even though the doc's like, he really needs to get on the BiPAP. So, but anyway, I went back and forth on those two for the entire visit, and then as we were shooting to try to get me home for the 23rd on our anniversary, we were able to trickle down to a nasal cannula, which is what I had at home.
Yes.
And so I did okay on it as long as I didn't move.
Yeah.
If I even turned over.
As long as you didn't move.
If I turned over in the bed, my oxygen would go from 90 to 70.
Yeah, any exertion.
Yeah, and I'd breathe about 10 or 15 times, catch my breath, and I'd be okay and smiling again. So,
yeah. But eventually, you made it, right? You made it out.
I made it out. I was happy to get home. They let me out around noon on my anniversary, and so we had a good meal that night as a family.
Very good.
And that was such a blessing.
Absolutely.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And my family tells me, even better than I knew, that they could tell I was started doing bad by then. We worked through the night. I slept fine, or at least I felt like I did. The next day, Rhett's birthday, we had dinner again, and they knew. My wife was even questioning, why did he come home? He really needs to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
And they saw it more than I did.
Sure.
In my heart, I was where I wanted to be.
That's right. So you're trying, you're doing everything you can. Oh, everything's fine, feeling better every second. And in reality, that wasn't maybe the case. But you're a determined man. It would be a good time to mention that, there's really two sides to Stephen. Or stories. So there's his COVID and that in and of itself is a huge story, but there's also his faith, which we haven't mentioned a whole lot of yet. So this will be a good time to mention that. You're a very I guess, God-fearing person and very strong in your faith. Have you been strong in your faith your whole life, or is this something that came later on after you got married? You really got this relationship with God that take me through that a little bit.
He's been there. My parents raised us in the church. We were in the pew on Sunday, and I can't thank them enough for getting us there every Sunday. And that has given me a foundation that has always been there for me.
Yes.
Even through thick and thin.
Absolutely.
So even dropping out of high school, getting in trouble back in those days, and all of the different things that was occurring, God was always there. I can't say that I cared for religion too much during that time, or let's say organized religion. It was more of my relationship with Him. I knew He was a prayer away anytime.
That's right.
24/7,
Yeah.
And so my faith grew day after day. Just like we all grow. We're either getting closer to God or we're getting further away as the sun rises and sets each day. So,
yes.
By the time at this point, there's some stories in the book that you'll read. It's interesting how he had me put it together, because I give all the credit to him. He guided this entire process, and I have some testimony that I share in the beginning so that the reader can understand me, get to know me, before we jump right into the nuts and bolts of the journaling through the COVID. But
yes, yeah, absolutely. And in particular, there was a story about a motorcycle accident that I don't want to tell on this show, but I will say it was a very eye-opening story that you had wrote regarding a motorcycle accident that you experienced. And so when you get the book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with that. But you got to read it. It's fantastic. And now, to this day, you're a pastor. You're a pastor. Shout out your church.
I am one of the associate pastors and the pastoral care minister at Live Oak Church in Watson.
There we go. Yeah. Live Oak Church. We know we're all familiar with Live Oak Church and the Live Oak area, and good people over there in that area of the world for sure. And that, you also do some things that I think are worth mentioning with
grief support.
Grief support group.
Yeah, we offer grief support to the community. We have a free counseling center there that's open to the community. It's works off of donation, and people come from all walks of life in the community, and they come and seek help for counseling. It could be mental health issues, just needing pastoral care for problems, death in the family. And so because of hospice and because of my experience in that regard, that was just one of the areas that I specialize in. And
that's a beautiful thing.
So we offer grief support a couple of times a month, and that meeting is available for anybody to come in.
Yes.
And then we do one-on-one grief support as well.
Okay. And no better time for that than right now in the world, for sure.
Absolutely.
So now we're back to your COVID journey, and you're home, and your family could tell something's not right. Your wife is starting to think, I don't know if he should have came home, right? And then it got really bad.
Yeah, so the night of my son's birthday, I thought things went pretty well. They all four, I'm totally outnumbered here. And
Yeah.
they said, no, Dad, you were not doing good.
Yeah.
And I went to bed, and the next morning, I probably had a really rough night, according to my wife. I believe I did. And then the next morning, for me, it was a blackout.
Wow. And it's I don't know if this is the right term, but it's on. It's time to go back, and so this is where it gets really serious with you and your condition, and they induce you into a coma. Is that what you call it?
So just backing up to the actual spot, Stephanie, my wife, checked my oxygen. It had dropped into the 40s, and obviously there were a lot of symptoms that she noticed immediately. She did what I had told her before that saved me the first time. Checked my oxygen, took me from the concentrator to the tank, turned it wide open, called 911.
Good woman under pressure.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so anyway, they came and moved me from my bed to the stretcher, brought me to the hospital. I don't recall the ride or any of that. That's why I say the lights were out, blackout.
Yes.
And I woke up in the ICU. So that was the 25th of September, the day after Rhett's birthday. And I woke up in ICU on the morning of the 26th when they had me on BiPAP to breathe. That's the one I told you I didn't like earlier. But
Chipmunk City.
Yeah. The doctor was there present at my bedside, and so was my nurse, and we did a FaceTime visit with Stephanie, and the doctor wanted me to tell her that I was agreeing to go on the ventilator. And so we made that call, and I told her, I said, babe, I've decided to allow them to go on the ventilator. And I had told her before I didn't want to ever go on one until COVID has arrived. Now I know the ventilator is your best chance to survive. And so just backing up a small bit, the doctor actually gave me two options. He said, we can medicate you and keep you comfortable as you pass, or we can try the ventilator.
I mean, it sounds like one option to me.
Yeah, so it was hospice, basically, palliative care, or we can try the ventilator.
Yeah.
And I said,
sometimes during Christmas, something magical happens.
Hey, Cricket customers. The Max with Ads plan is included with the Cricket $60 unlimited plan at no additional cost. And this holiday season, Max is the one to watch when you're feeling festive.
Son of a nutcracker!
Cozy up to all the holiday classics, like Elf, 8-Bit Christmas, and the Harry Potter 8-film collection. Just log in with your Cricket username and password to experience Max on all your favorite devices. Phone plan streams and standard definition. Programming subject to change. Fees, terms, and restrictions apply. See cricketwireless.com for details.
in this case, and they already knew because she had said at my previous admission that I really didn't want to ever be put on life support. You know, if I'm that dire, let me go and be with the Lord, you know, and that was just something we had talked about before, but COVID is a different animal.
Totally.
Yeah. So, of course, I went with option 2, and he said, we need to FaceTime your wife so she doesn't, he didn't say so she doesn't think, cut this part out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went with option 2, and we FaceTimed my wife, and we had this conversation. And I had told her, I said, babe, I want to let them put me on the ventilator. And she said, you do what you have to do to get better so you can come home.
Love it. Love it. And, you know, it's interesting that to tell you, I I guess, where science had come from one point to another with COVID, I guess you could say. There was a point where I fully admit that I thought the ventilator was the wrong way to go, because I felt like, man, every time somebody gets on a ventilator, they die. Maybe it's because your body is not kind of fighting for itself. At that point, you're having a crutch involved, and maybe your body's kind of giving up on itself, for lack of a better term, because something else is breathing for you. And so I was of the attitude, I was like, don't put me on a vent, because once I go on that vent, it's over with. But as things have progressed, it saved your life, right?
Absolutely. I would not be here talking to you. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've been trying to clear up for the last year, at least where my area of influence is.
Yes. And certainly more educated than me and most Facebook people on that subject. Is number one, just from sheer education, you're a nurse. Number two, you've been through it. And so I'm gonna believe you. I'm gonna believe you over my opinion.
I've had people come for grief counseling that come to the grief support group, and they're like, they regret and they beat themselves up for putting their loved one on the ventilator, and then they died. And I'm like, no, if you wouldn't have put them on the vent, they would have died sooner. The vent was the last option.
That's right.
And it gives the patient a fighting chance to rest the lungs, let them control the gases of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchanging, let them inflate the lungs more than you would have breathed on your own, because we're half-stepping our breathing when we have pneumonia or we're having respiratory distress. We're not breathing our full breath. The vent helps expand the lungs, to a capacity that's specific settings that allows you to recover day by day, and as they're trying to wash the virus out of your body and get you to a point where you'll be able to live on your own.
Yeah.
I know I'm a walking miracle. I know the Lord has saved me maybe for this very purpose, to be able to talk to people about, that their loved one was not alone if they died, that the Lord was there with them. He was with me the entire time, without a doubt.
Yes.
And the ventilator is not what killed your loved one if they did pass. It's COVID-19 that did.
Stephen, so you're on that vent. This time you had reached out to your wife, and she says, do whatever you got to do to get better and get home. You get on the vent, and when they put you on that vent, is it automatic that that's a coma related situation, correct? Anytime you go on a vent for anybody?
In most cases,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
they sedate you. They make sure that you're comfortable, and usually give you something for memory block, so you don't recollect a lot of things.
Yeah, interesting. And how long were you on the vent? Would be my first question.
So I went on the vent on September 26th, that morning after that FaceTime visit with my wife. And which wasn't really a visit. It was just the doctor there and the nurse there wanting, as witnesses, wanting me to tell her that I was giving them permission to put me on it.
Yes.
And so once they sedated me and off I went, it was blackout number 2 there.
Yeah.
And so I was on the vent for a total of 8 days.
Yeah. And here's the part I struggle with, because I'm like, I don't want to tell too much of this because it's something really people need to read and see. It involves lions, and how close do you think, or do you know, that you were to actual death? Would you say?
The first time in my home, when she called 911, if she would not have done that, I would have died on the 12th of September.
Yes,
that is without a doubt. I would have died.
Yes,
and then in the hospital, When I got there, I almost died. And that's a story in itself. It's not in the book, but that's a story. But basically, I was not in a good place. I had COVID-related negative symptoms in that first admit, where you get rapid atrial fib with rapid ventricular response, and my heart rate got into the 160s, 180s.
Wow.
It lasted.
You're running marathons. Yeah.
And that went on for a few days before they could convert it. And that was the worst time of this entire event next to recovering. But so that was another time that I was very close to death. And I knew how serious it was. Even again, once again, I knew how close, how serious that moment was. And then the 25th with the blackout and my oxygen dropping to 40%. Again, that was number 3. Multiple times while I was on the vent. I mean, I say 4 or 5 times, but it was clearly at minimum 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, it was a fight.
Yeah,
it was a fight, and you had a vision.
Yeah, so
at some point,
I knew what was interesting, and I want the readers to read it too. I'm not sure why that scenario the Lord picked with the lions. I'm not sure. I did study Daniel right before I had gotten sick. I was reading in Daniel, and so that could play some part in it. And there's just multiple things that I always try to analyze that. And during my recovery at home, I was trying to piece the puzzle together. I wanted to know my story so I could tell my story.
Yes.
And
very well put.
And I had a lot of black areas there, or shady, foggy areas where I had my medical records. It was about 2 or 3 inches thick, 300 pages. I had 40 pages of Facebook posts that I had copied and pasted into a Word document just so I could kind of sequence of events, because those are dated and timestamped.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So, and then I have my medical records, which are dated and timestamped. And then I had my little bit of journaling I did when I was sick, but more journaling that I did as I started to. I had a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah, you weren't doing much else.
not when I was recovering.
Yeah,
it was just eating and sleeping and doing some writing. And so forth. And so when I put those 3 together, and what recollection I had, and then the reflection of my family, my wife especially, my kids, my friends.
Yeah.
It really laid out. I had more revelation at my dinner table 2 or 3 weeks after I got out of the hospital than I did the whole time. I had no idea what God had done.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we look back at our life, 10, 15 years ago, and we're like, wow, Lord, I can't believe you did that. And I do that all the time.
I do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at that dinner table, when I was recovering, my oxygen in the kitchen, I'm sitting there with my laptop. I'm just trying to review my medical records, look at all of the support that my family had, look at my wife coming out of her shell and really driving, these daily posts and letting everybody know what to pray for, and just looking at all the comments and the responses of my friends and my loved ones and people in the community, people in the church that I was serving, the churches that I served prior, it was just the most amazing experience. And I shed so many happy tears during that time.
I bet you did. And, probably undeserving of so much love and
no doubt.
And people just, fighting for you with their prayers and things like that. Those are humbling to say the least, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we won't say a whole lot about this vision, but I will tell you, whoever did the artist rendition of it did a fabulous job. That was one of the things that stood out to me. The vision itself is amazing, and we're not going to tell you a whole lot about it. You're going to have to read the book.
What I would like to say, though,
Yes.
is because of the vision, because of what was happening, I could not pinpoint the day.
Yeah.
I believe that it was happening towards the end of the week, where the doctors were giving my wife not good news, but not bad news.
Yeah.
Nothing encouraging, basically.
It's a great way to put it, yeah.
And there was a day or two she didn't get a call because it was the same information. The vent's doing all the work.
Yeah.
And so it did that for about 3 days. And so I would believe that it was somewhere in that 8-day period towards the end is about when this happened, because I came out of the situation, the vision. I actually came out of it knowing everything was going to be fine.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be okay, and I was laying there on a ventilator, waking up on a ventilator.
Yeah.
Couldn't even stand up if I wanted to. I mean, I had zero strength, but I was going to be fine. I already knew.
Wrap your minds around that.
And it wasn't because of...
You had a comfort over you.
Oh, it was...
At that point.
No doubt. And
that's amazing.
Just the blessing, the best blessing in the entire world, my entire life came from that revelation that occurred at my dinner table. Then when I woke up, I remember what happened when I was waking up. And then my wife was on the edge of a cliff.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. I'm Margot Robbie, and I play Barbie.
And I'm Ryan Gosling, and I play Ken.
Max is now the exclusive streaming home of Barbie.
So cool.
And the Max with Ads plan is included with your Cricket $60 unlimited plan at no additional cost. Log in with your Cricket username and password to experience Max on all your favorite devices.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever.
Don't miss Barbie, now streaming on Max. Phone plan streams in standard definition. Programming subject to change. Fees, terms, and restrictions apply. See cricketwireless.com for details.
Sometimes during Christmas, something magical happens.
Hey, Cricket customers. The Max with Ads plan is included with the Cricket $60 unlimited plan at no additional cost. And this holiday season, Max is the one to watch when you're feeling festive.
Son of a nutcracker!
Cozy up to all the holiday classics like Elf, 8-Bit Christmas, and the Harry Potter 8-film collection. Just log in with your Cricket username and password to experience Max on all your favorite devices. Phone plan streams in standard definition. Programming subject to change. Fees, terms, and restrictions apply. See cricketwireless.com for details.
Looking, saying we're going to lose him. She didn't come out and say that, but it was all about her being that she was not okay.
Yeah.
People were asking, "Are you okay? Are y'all okay?" Everybody asked that because
yes.
they care.
Yes.
And she's like, "Yeah, we're okay." And then she says in this big, long, drawn out Facebook post, "Why did I say that?"
Yeah.
We're not okay.
Yeah.
And then she lists all these reasons why they're not okay.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
So when those two paths crossed, it was really the sweetest thing that God's ever done in our lives.
What
ever.
a blessing. Yeah. So here's a question I have for you after reading this, and we haven't pre-discussed this, but vancomycin, which is an antibiotic, at what point did you get put on vancomycin?
That was the first hospitalization. So what happens with COVID is that it brings, of course, the inflammation, the swelling. Your lungs on the inside, the inner lining, they swell with inflammation. Fluid comes to the scene. The fluid is there and dormant or what have you, and then bacteria begin to grow in there. Fluid and in the lung tissues. So not only do you have viral pneumonia, eventually it leads into bacterial pneumonia, you have a mix. And so I remember the emergency room doctor, when I came in on the 12th, they immediately rushed me through the CT machine, and the ER doctor said, you're covered with mixed viral and bacterial pneumonia. And we're going to put you in ICU. We're probably going to have to put you on a ventilator. and this was the first round.
Yeah.
And so, which that didn't ended up happening the first time, but
Right.
He did warn me that was a very strong possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, that not only did they give me the remdesivir, which was pretty much the only drug that I had available to me at that time specifically for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I went on a clinical trial, and I got another medication that's supposed to help with the inflammation of the lungs. I mentioned that in the story.
Yeah.
And they also put me on multiple antibiotics, which included the vancomycin.
Yeah, and vancomycin is a pretty strong
yes
antibiotic. Probably one of the, if not the strongest, one of the.
Definitely one of the top strongest.
And I'll tell you my experience with it, and then I'll see if you had the same. So I had, long story short, we used to have, prior to the flood, a camper with like slides in it and everything, 40 feet, big camper. We'd go on family camping trips, loved it. So every spring I would get out there and wash it, right? Because it would get moldy and stuff during the winter time. And at that time of my life, which this has went away completely, strangely, but I used to have a little psoriasis patch on my knee, and it would itch all the time. And I can recall this like it was yesterday. I'd go out there, wash that camper, and you know, the whole time I'm itching my knee and stuff. And back then I ran a little bit, and me and my wife went running, and I got home, and the next day I went to step out of bed, and my knee was killing me. And I'm like, I wonder if I did something when I was running. Well, when I looked down, my knee was swollen. And I'm like, oh, that ain't good. So I went to take another step, and I couldn't hardly walk. And I told my wife was getting the kids ready for school, and I said, I got to go to the doctor. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, my knee. And she come in there and looked, and she's like, oh. And she, okay, you know, we got mother-in-law to bring the kids to school, and we went to the urgent care, and they checked it out, and they said, you need to go to a specialist right away. They sent me to Baton Rouge Orthopedic, and had a great orthopedist there. By the time, this is about a 3-hour time period, by the time I had left the urgent care and got to the ortho and got in there and everything, I had lines running all up my legs. I mean, must have been 10 of them, big lines. My knee was this big. And I remember we were waiting to get a room, and I was freezing. And I'm warm natured as it is. My wife had 4 blankets on me and was holding me like this, and I could not quit shaking. Didn't know what was going on. Couldn't stop shaking. Couldn't stop the tremors. And I'm sitting there, and in your mind, my mind was fine. So I'm thinking, okay, I need to control this. I need, it's not even cold. And eventually we get in there. The orthopedist gets in there, and he says, we need to get you in the lake, like right away. You got a problem. You've got a staph infection, and something has gotten in your knee, and your body don't like it, and we need to get you in there. They did. And it was 3 days of struggle, right? They were giving me everything, and these lines were getting worse and worse. And I'll never forget this. The doctor came in, and he said, Jim, I gotta tell you something. If this does not go away by tomorrow, I'm gonna have to cut your leg off. And I said, what? And he said, and my kids are right there. My wife's right there. And I'm, that's a process. You got to process that in your brain. And I'm like, did you just say he said, I'm going to give you something called vancomycin. And he said, we're going to give it to you through an IV, and it'd be like a bag or whatever. And we're going to continually give it to you throughout the night. And if I come in here tomorrow, I'm going to have to probably cut your leg off to keep you alive, because this infection is about to kill you. And, what do? You pray, right? The first go round with that vanc, my lips chapped like you would not believe. And I remember thinking, this thing is strong. It's almost like it was drying my body out. Obviously I still have both legs. The next day, and I'll always believe this was a miracle, a God-given miracle. The next day, the doctor walked in, and they pulled that thing off, and I had no lines. completely gone.
Amen.
And I think he was as relieved as I was, because that was the last thing that man wanted to do. And I told him then I said, thank you for doing that. and really giving me that one more day, right? Because that was a call he had to make, because I could have died that night. Is this going to work? Is it not going to work? But he told me, he said, that was a last resort. That's a tough antibiotic. And I'll tell you how tough it was. For 2 years after that, if I went out in the sun for more than 15 minutes, I would almost get sick, like almost to the point of puking. It affected my body afterwards in 90 different ways that were totally different than I was before. Now, I did recover eventually, but things like cutting the grass, which I could do in one pop, I would have to take many breaks to cut the grass, things like that. And over time, it would get a little better and better. But that is a strong antibiotic. And the reason I brought that up is I am curious if you ever if you've noticed anything, and I'm sure it's related. In your case, it's probably related to a ton of different things. But vancomycin, when you get on that's when, even doctors know that you don't just give that for anything. It's got to be pretty serious, right?
Definitely. And in your case, it saved your life without doubt. Saved your leg, but it also saved your life.
Absolutely.
I blame everything on COVID.
Yeah.
I say vancomycin was my friend.
Yeah.
We're buddies.
Yeah.
So I blame everything on COVID.
Yeah.
If I have a hair out of place, it's because of COVID.
It's got to be.
It's just awful.
Yeah.
It's a year ago right now, I was on the vent.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of where I was, because I came off the vent on the 3rd of October.
Yeah.
So I was probably very close, if not in the middle of that vision right now.
Yeah, amazing.
So, but yeah, vancomycin is a very potent, serious drug, and they give it in the worst of cases. And we can sometimes have side effects from the treatment. It's like a lot of cancer patients getting chemo and radiation. These treatments are very toxic to the body at times, and that's why it has to be done a very special way. And
but they're better than the alternative, right?
Exactly.
In my case, for sure. I mean, it's my friend too. Yeah. But I did find it interesting how the side effects were so much after. And look, I researched that drug till you would have thought I was a doctor as much as I was Googling on that after, because I would notice these things that just were different with me. And over time, I did manage to get back to somewhat normal and as normal as I can be. But wow. And then when I read your book and I saw that you had also been on it, I'm like, I know that one. Interesting.
Yeah, it took care of the bacterial part of the pneumonia for sure. The Lord had His hand in it the whole time, but it was definitely needed in the situation, along with multiple other drugs. And again, they were throwing anything they could. At that time, we didn't have a lot of the medicines that we have this year.
Yeah, or the knowledge really of the disease.
Yeah, they were learning. They were learning even on me. They were learning.
Yeah,
at the time.
So. Yeah, exactly. And so obviously you're still here. So at some point, you made it through, and the readers will enjoy immensely reading about that journey. You got home and you still, your side effects are pretty bad, right? With, I guess you'd call them side effects, or your recovery time maybe would be a better word. Still kind of struggling with some things with that.
Yeah. Nothing like where I was last year. No. And I'm so grateful. I mean,
absolutely.
Even, they're subtle, and again, I do blame everything on COVID. When I have an ill feeling or whatever, and that's just kind of fun, joke with the family, But
You have to have that too.
Yeah,
right?
and they were just as traumatized as I was, and that's why this is a one family's journey, not just Stephen's journey. They were
great way to put that.
Yeah, they were definitely. We still. It's a somber feeling even right now, being this is the first year, the anniversary that I was on the vent during this time. It's a somber feeling this week at our house.
Sure.
We're very thankful. Thanksgiving last year was celebrated in a very mighty way because it was the best Thanksgiving I think we ever had.
Yeah.
I went home on the 11th of October, and I was on oxygen. I was in a wheelchair for about 4 weeks. And I had they offered for me to go to rehab. And after being in the hospital for a month and away from my family, I really wanted to be with my family. And so
100% understand that.
I elected to be at home with my family and have therapy come to my house. So I had a awesome therapist, Megan, and I mentioned her in the book. And we have a picture in there of us. And,
yes.
And,
incidentally, I'm glad you brought that. There are a lot of pictures of people throughout his journey, your friends that would bring you smoothies and all of those things. So you'll be able to see all of that as well. He had a lot of visitors during his time through this journey.
This is a book that I actually had to pay more to the publisher for the initial down payment because I had so many pictures.
Yeah.
Most books only have a couple, one or two, and I had over 20. So, and I hope that helps the reader, feel the story, see what I was seeing.
I think it did.
Yeah.
In my case, for sure.
And I do take pictures of. I had them taking pictures of me. I would give my phone to the nurses and say, "Take a picture, for me."
Yeah.
I guess I was going to document it at some point. The Lord just put it on my heart, and I'm so grateful that those pictures were taken.
Yeah. And, you're not only a patient at that point, you're also a colleague.
Yeah.
And, there's an interesting story in there that we won't tell, but just kind of a little piece of it is, you're a nurse, right? And you said in the book, one of the things I found interesting was you said, sometimes nurses can make for the worst patients because, you almost know too much about someone else's job. But you had experience with some great nurses. You had some experiences with some that weren't so great that you highlight in there because like anything else, I mean, there's highly skilled and less skilled and all of those sorts of things. So I found it interesting to read about those.
Sure.
Something else you can look forward to in the book. So the obvious question, when, and I know you can't give hard dates, but when can people look forward to getting either their hands on the book? Is it going to be available as a download? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so the book is finished. The interior of the book is done. Right now, they're finishing polishing up the cover. We already have the ISBN number, the barcode, everything that you need. So I haven't got a hard date from the publisher, but it should be within the next few weeks.
Fantastic. So plenty of time for Christmas. Look, this would be a great Christmas gift for somebody. That was the first thing I thought of, whether it's a friend, whether it's someone that struggled with COVID themselves or had someone close to them maybe pass away. Everybody will find interest in this. Maybe you're blessed and you've never had COVID, never had to deal with COVID. You don't know anyone that's had it. Whatever. You're still going to find interest in this book. It's just a great book. And I really look forward to people getting out there, hearing it and stuff like that. Now, will it be at some point, do you foresee a Kindle version of this book, for example?
Right out the door.
Right out the door.
Yeah,
very good.
It'll be paperback, hardback if you wanted it, and then electronic copies. You can download the e-copies.
Yeah.
It'll be on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Apple stores, pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere. And, I'm I'm a physical book guy personally, but my wife is a Kindle person. Yeah. So there'll be something in there for everybody. What about an audio version?
We're going to be working on that.
Fantastic.
I was going to actually talk with you about renting the booth here.
That might be why I brought that up. I'd love to rent you the booth.
Actually, I've had multiple people ask, and they, they said it would be so great if it was my voice, me telling my own story. So if I can just talk my wife into doing her part, she did. I did include. There's a chapter of reflections, as you mentioned.
That's right.
So I have her starting it off, and some friends and some family, and if I can talk them into doing it, I'd like their voices to be heard for those particular parts.
I think it's a great idea, and I'll tell you personally, this is just my personal take, but I love listening to audiobooks that are read by the author. When it's read by somebody else, sometimes they're great, but it seems less authentic to me. I don't know why. Maybe, I don't know how many people out there have that same feeling, but definitely a market for audiobooks. I mean, I've been just kind of asking around, getting a feel, and people are like, oh yeah, I don't do nothing but listen to them now. Life's fast paced and not everybody has that. Although you need to take some time to reflect, sit down, do something for yourself, unplug, read a book. Those sorts of things. A lot of people just don't feel like they have that time, and they feel like, hey, that's a great thing I can plug in when I'm sitting in traffic and on the way to work, and I can and there's something to be said for that too. So, but still take that seventh day off, as Stephen would tell you.
As the good Lord has.
That's right. Commanded. Yes.
Not suggested.
Absolutely. That's right. And that's all. That's for our greater health, both spiritually and mentally.
Absolutely.
Physically too. Yeah. I set a goal for this year, and one of my goals was I want to get better spiritually, physically, and mentally. So in all three aspects. I think the struggle for everybody is finding balance, right?
Absolutely.
That is a fight, especially when you're driven, because it's not out of malice. It's just out of sheer drive. Driven people are blessed with that drive, but it can also be a curse because it takes you away from other things in your life that need attention, like your faith or your family or, all of those sorts of things. That drive's hard to fight because you're trying to share yourself in 9 different directions. So I think that's why that seventh day is there, and why it's so important that we take advantage of that. So that's something that I definitely need to work on too, and I will this year. Hopefully I'll get a little better on all three of those, Stephen.
Yes, sir. Me too.
Thank you very much for coming on. Your story is amazing. Hopefully we didn't give away too much of it. Just enough to make you want to go out there and read that book and get more information. I'm telling you, the vision part of this book is amazing. I can see it in my head right now. So go out there, check it out. I will keep everybody posted. Look on my Facebook and stuff, and Stephen's going to communicate with me the second this thing's available. And I'm going to really push it out there to all you viewers and listeners, and you'll know. I'll link it to my post, and you can go get it. It'll be ready for you. I want to thank everyone out there for listening and watching Local Leaders, the podcast. We're absolutely blessed to have every one of you, support us all day long and all night long. And I also want to mention, we will find out, actually, probably by the time that this airs, it will be already announced, but it is Wednesday right now, and the 29th of September, and tomorrow we find out if we are a People's Choice winner for Best Business Podcast in the world from People's Choice. We're in the top 10. We will find that out tomorrow. I will be watching with my brother from another mother, I guess you could say, Woody Overton of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast, who is up for 4 of those. So we're going to have a little get together with each other and just kick back and watch with our families. And I want to thank everyone out there. I'm already a winner. Believe me, all of you went out there and voted, and I've already won in my mind. But it would be great if if that ends up coming to fruition. Thank you so much to our sponsors. We could do none of this without all of you. And until next time, I'm Jim Chapman, reminding you to love your community, support local business, and keep leading. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. You could do a classic herb-roasted turkey or spice it up and make turkey tacos. Serve up a go-to shrimp cocktail or use Simple Truth wild-caught shrimp for your first Cajun risotto. Make creamy mac and cheese or a spinach artichoke fondue from our selection of Murray's cheese. No matter how you shop, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace all your holiday traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, oh, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.